But coming back to the West's prophecies for Russia, all the predictions about isolation and economic gloom and doom, see how they're playing out.
Russia is predicted to have a very sharp recession in 2022. Now we are predicting negative 6% for 2022. Before we were predicting negative 8.5%. So that's the upward revision. But it's still fairly sizable recession in Russia in 2022. The European economy, we're reducing down the growth levels to about 2.6%, but it's still positive.
You just heard the IMF's chief economist. He says the Russian economy is doing better than expected. What was expected? A collapse of the Russian system. At least that's what the West had expected. Ever since Russia invaded Ukraine, the West has been slapping sanctions. This week, for example, began with the headline, Britain targets Russian officials in new wave of sanctions. Russia's officials have been targeted. Banks have been targeted. Brands have been targeted. Financial institutions have been targeted. Trade has been targeted. Basically, everything Russian has been sanctioned by the West. And what's the end result? Here's what else the IMF chief economist said, and I'm quoting. The Russian central bank and the Russian policymakers have been able to stave off a banking panic or financial meltdown when the sanctions were first imposed. He also said that the rising energy prices are, quote unquote, providing an enormous amount of revenues to the Russian economy. What about the West? The countries that slapped sanctions on Russia, how are they faring? Europe is bearing the brunt of the energy war. Look at Germany. On the 22nd of February this year, Germany suspended the certification of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. This move was supposed to hurt Russia. Today is the 27th of July 2022 and Germany is in the middle of an energy crisis. By the end of this week, their energy supply will drop to 20%. Moscow says it's all because of technical reasons, but the world knows that Putin is pulling the strings. He is punishing the EU's biggest economy. European sanctions have basically boomeranged. The 27 EU states are scrambling to fill their gas storage. Case study number 2, the United Kingdom. On the 22nd of February, the UK froze assets of 5 Russian banks. Again, it is the 27th of July today. The IMF is upgrading Russia's GDP estimate by 2.5 percentage points. What about the UK? Its inflation has hit a 40-year high and it faces a 50-50 chance of recession. And I'm not saying that the Russian economy has not been affected at all. Russia has taken a hit, no two ways about it. Its economy is going to contract by at least 6%. But for the West, it will be a Pyrrhic victory, if you can call it a victory at all. The UK, for example, is expected to grow by 0.5% in 2023. This too is from the IMF forecast. Moral of the story, sanctions don't work. And we told you this a long time ago. What's the point of these sanctions or of forcing a country to default on its debt when creditors know very well that the default is artificially orchestrated? Today, energy prices are shooting through the roof thanks to the Western sanctions. As for Russia, it is neither badly affected nor isolated. You heard what the IMF had to say. Now look at where Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has been jet-setting. He is on a tour of Africa. So far, he's visited Egypt, Congo and Uganda. Next stop, Ethiopia. In Congo, Lavrov defended the war. He blamed the West for the rising prices and said there are no barriers to Ukraine's grain exports.
Unbiased experts also confirmed what we have said since the very beginning. The grain terminal of Odessa port is located at a considerable distance from the military part. There are no obstacles to starting deliveries of grain to customers in line with the deal signed, and we have not created any obstacles.
In Uganda, President Yoweri Museveni told Lavrov that he saw no reason to criticize the Russian war. Do you see what they're trying to do here? This tour of Africa is Russia's way of diversifying its diplomacy, of looking away from the West. It is geostrategic posturing. Russia accounts for less than 1% of foreign direct investment in Africa. This continent has by and large been a battlefield between the West and Asia and China, in fact. Africa has also refused to be party to Western sanctions, much like Asia. African countries have not joined the West in slamming Russia. Remember, 17 African nations abstained on a UN resolution against Russia's war. They see the futility of sanctions. And Russia sees another opportunity to counter the West. Europe is under attack. Russia is waging an economic war. Russian gas supplies to Europe are down by 80%. Russia could single-handedly push Europe into recession. This gas war threatens governments and leaders in the EU, and Europe has virtually no defense. Today, Russia announced more supply cuts. The Europeans saw this coming, but that does not make their situation any better. Earlier this month, Russia shut off the Nord Stream pipeline. They said it was for maintenance. Europe feared the supplies will not resume. They did. But now Russia has struck another blow. It has cut supplies further. In fact, these cuts began last month. Quick primer. Russia supplies gas to Europe through Nord Stream 1. It's a gas pipeline. It is operated by Russia's state-owned company Gazprom. Until yesterday, Nord Stream 1 was operating at just 40% of its capacity. Today, Russia has reduced it by half, meaning this pipeline is now operating at just 20% of its capacities. Let me repeat that. From 100% before the war, it went down to 40%, and now it has fallen to 20%. So Europe has now lost 80% of its supply from Russia. And this is bad news, whichever way you look at it. Russia made up more than 40% of Europe's natural gas needs. That's what Russia supplied. Now it accounts for just 15%. The Nord Stream is Russia's biggest pipeline. Last year, it delivered more than a third of European gas imports, but now the supply from Russia is as good as gone. The question is, why has Moscow taken the step? To build pressure, to strike a blow. Russia says it is not getting the parts it needs for the pipeline to function. And for that, it blames Western sanctions. So the message is clear. If you want Russian gas, lift the sanctions.
Russia is not interested in stopping gas supplies to Europe. Russia is a responsible supplier of gas, and whoever says what, be in the European Commission, European capital cities, United States of America, Russia was, is, and remains a country that in no small way guarantees Europe's energy security, and not just verbally, but de facto. On the other hand, if Europe continues to move along this path of recklessly introducing limitations and sanctions, which hit right back at themselves, then the situation here would be a different one.
That statement / threat from the Kremlin came yesterday. Today, Russia has walked the talk. Who is hurt the most? Germany. They are the ones feeling the biggest impact. Germany still depends on Russia for around a third of its supplies, but now they'll have to do with less Russian gas. Who else is affected? Poland, Bulgaria, Finland, Denmark, the Netherlands, Italy, France, Austria, Slovakia, and the Czech Republic. All of these countries have either suffered partial cuts or completely lost Russian gas supply. What will be the economic impact of these cuts? In one word, dire. Leading European economies could be pushed into recession. If Russia completely stops supply, Hungary's economic output will decline by 6.5%. Italy will lose 5.7%. Austria and Germany almost 3% each. And that's why the Russian cuts are worrying. They could plunge Europe into a deep recession. Germany has launched a fierce attack on Russia. It says there is no technical reason for Russia to cut supplies. This is what the German economy minister said.
To draw a line, I think it's an important, very important next step. It shows that Europe stays united, that Europe is able to find unity and giving a strong signal also in the day where the flows of gas in Nord Stream 1 are reduced to another 20% to Putin and to Russia. You won't split us.
You won't split us, he says. So Berlin is banking on European unity, and it doesn't look like a very bright idea, and I'll tell you why. Today, an important meeting took place in Brussels. Energy ministers from European Union states met. They reached a deal to ration gas. Remember, we told you about this proposal. The EU has proposed cuts on gas consumption. All countries will reduce consumption. They proposed what is now called the 15% rule, 15%. That's how much they propose to cut. European countries were asked to reduce their gas usage by 15%. For now, these cuts will be voluntary. But if push comes to shove, Brussels wanted the power to enforce these cuts. The EU leadership did not get the deal they wanted. Their proposals have been substantially watered down. They've had to exempt a large number of industries. Plus, they've given some countries a backdoor. Under certain circumstances, these countries can be exempted from the 15% rule. So the EU's plan is not really binding. And that's because a number of countries were opposed to rationing. Spain and Portugal, for example, they don't really depend on Russian gas, so they don't want to ration gas and hurt their economies. Then we have Poland. It was opposed to the 15% plan because its storage is almost full. Poland has a good reserve supply. It says the EU's proposal to ration gas is, quote unquote, totally against the idea of energy security and democracy. Greece, Cyprus, Malta, and Ireland have also rejected mandatory rationing. Hungary is on a different trajectory altogether. It wants to buy more Russian gas. Recently, the Hungarian foreign minister was in Moscow. He was trying to secure another 1 billion cubic meters of Russian natural gas. So long story short, Europe is divided and Russia is hitting it where it hurts the most. Russia is cutting gas supplies and European nations don't want to cut consumption. Ukraine is calling it a gas war. Listen to what President Volodymyr Zelensky said.
Today we saw new gas threats to Europe. Despite the Nord Stream turbine concession, Russia is not planning to resume gas supply to European countries as it is obliged to do under a contract. This is all done by Russia on purpose to make it as difficult as possible for Europeans to prepare for winter. And this is an open gas war that Russia is waging against a united Europe. This is precisely how it should be perceived.
There's no doubt Russia is waging an economic war on Europe. It is weaponizing gas supplies. But remember, Europe too targeted Russia with sanctions. And this is war. When you attack, you must prepare for a counterattack. So what has Europe done to save itself? Does it have alternatives? Can it get gas from elsewhere? Well, it does have some options. Option number one is the United States. Europe could buy gas from the US, but American supplies are going to be expensive. Transportation is the big challenge. There is no gas pipeline between America and Europe. So the gas needs to be transported in liquid form via ships, and that ends up being more expensive. Option number two is Norway and Azerbaijan. They could supply gas. Europe already has agreements in place, but do Norway and Azerbaijan have enough supply? Experts say they don't, not immediately at least. They won't be able to fill the gap left behind by Russia. And that's why Europe is stuck. It needs alternatives to Russian gas. Its options are limited and less than ideal. And it is running out of time. A cold winter and a deep recession are around the corner.